Now, every time I say that the price of inaction is far greater than the cost of making a mistake, some of my political advisors get ulcers. I'm learning that in politics, the cost of making a mistake has become the measure of all things. Today in politics, inaction is the preferred operating mode. It's just safer, right? If you can get away with seeming to do something without actually doing anything, you will eliminate a lot of risk. It's the best of both worlds, except for, of course, it's wrong. And this attitude, an attitude that condones putting off the tough decisions and real leadership, is why we find ourselves in such a mess today. Over the years, Mom and life have instilled in me several more values that I stick to with a passion. Maybe they'll sound naive or simple to you, but I have found that they work. And the first one is, I believe that people are basically good. I really absorbed this lesson at eBay. eBay is an incredible example of the goodness of people, and here's why. Every single day, millions of transactions take place on eBay. These transactions involve people around the world exchanging money and goods sight unseen. This is a notion that many people simply cannot believe. I remember potential early investors saying eBay would not work because people are basically bad. They were really sorry they did not invest in eBay. But the notion of people are basically good worked then, and it still does today. For every instance of bad behavior on the net or on eBay, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples of excellent behavior. Behavior that reaffirms your confidence in humanity. eBay is a Fortune 500 company built on the power of good people doing the right thing. Just think about that for a bit, and it will make you feel really good. The second value that I learned along the way was I believe very firmly in the power of listening. Everyone has something to contribute, a unique perspective or a unique set of talents. Listening to others instead of just yourself often unlocks the door to great solutions for the challenges of business, government, and life. I also believe that we always have to be brave, and sometimes we have to be courageous, because things worth doing are often hard. Sometimes the situations we find ourselves in are downright daunting. I can tell you, you may remember on June 10th of 1999, eBay went down, what we called in technology hard down, meaning there was not a sign of life on the entire website, was hard down for 22 hours. And at the time, I didn't know a lot about technology. And I must tell you, I was daunted by the prospect when a young computer scientist came into my cubicle and said, "Meg, I'm not sure we can bring the site back up." We had a market cap of $20 billion. 1 million people, 300,000 people earned their living on the site at that time. And you can imagine the pit in my stomach. And the only thing I knew how to do was lead by being there. Because if I was there, the very best executives from all of our vendors, by Sun, Oracle, VeriSign, Veritas, would be there to help. And together, we ultimately solved the problem and brought the site back up. But I was scared to death, and I led by just sheer courage and the ability to be there and commandeer the resources that we need. The next value is I believe that we have to invest in our relationships, because the people we share our lives with give us energy and courage. And there are so many people along the way that have helped me, but let me tell you about two. First is Frank Wells. Frank Wells was the former president and chief executive officer of Disney. I joined Disney as a young woman in 1989. And back then, Disney was a very tough, mostly male environment. In fact, we used to liken it to a rugby field, where you had to be careful or you would come out with broken fingers or black eyes. And Frank took a special interest in me. It matters, doesn't it, when someone takes a special interest in you? And he taught me a lot about executive communication. He taught me to stand up for myself. He said, "You are just as smart as those guys. Go out there and tell them what you think." And as many of you know, Frank was killed in a helicopter crash probably 10 years ago now. And I miss him today. I miss him too much today as I did that back then. But I will tell you, I was into eBay for about 2 years. It was 2000, and eBay had achieved tremendous success. And one day, my assistant came into my cubicle, and she said, "Luann Wells is on the phone." Luann is Frank's wife. And I got on the phone. I hadn't talked to Luann really since Frank's funeral. And she said, "I've been watching the success of eBay, and I've watched your success, and I just want you to know that Frank Wells would be proud." And it just made an enormous difference that she called me to tell me that Frank, although he's not with us, would have been proud of what I had done at eBay. The second person who's made a huge difference in my life is my husband, Griff. Griff and I will be married 29 years in June. And I'm not sure, thank you for that, I'm not sure I'm entirely what Griff bargained for. Griff was raised in a very traditional Southern family. He's from Birmingham, Alabama. But he has been incredibly supportive along the way. And when I came to eBay, it was very clear that we were going to have a reallocation of who did what in the family. Because as you know, households do not run themselves. And trying to take eBay from a startup to a grown-up with 2 boys who were then 10 and 13, there wasn't enough of me to go around. And Griff deserves a huge amount of credit because he was home at night for dinner when I couldn't be there. He ran the house. He planned our vacations, and he really stepped up to the breach. And you know what? Not everyone would have done it, and I am always deeply grateful to him. He was 100% supportive all the time. And sometimes he needed to buck me up. I will never forget when my oldest son, who is now 24, was just 3 years old. He'd gotten into a preschool in San Francisco. We were very excited to have him get into the preschool. You know how hard that is. And I got a call from another mother to organize driving groups. And she said, "We're organizing driving groups, and I'm going to drive on Mondays. Could you drive on Tuesdays?" And I said, "Well, I can a lot of the time, but I work full-time at Bain & Company, and I may not be able to do it every Tuesday, but our nanny could certainly drive." And with an icy tone, she said over the phone, "I did not quit my job at McKinsey to have someone else's nanny drive my child." And I have to tell you, if it hadn't been for my husband who came home that night and said, "Meg, do not worry about it. You keep on doing what you're doing." But I must tell you, it took me 6 months to recover from that phone call. The next thing I'd like to talk about is I believe that nothing is worth doing if it compromises your integrity. Like all of you, I have been appalled in recent years, and especially in recent months, by the amount of greed, selfishness, thoughtlessness, and downright corruption that has crept into so many of our public and private institutions. And while we can all get ourselves caught up in the complexity of Ponzi schemes, the excesses of corporate leadership, or the problems with government, at the end of the day, it all comes back to values. When people lose sight of good values, they surely lose their way. And one of the best pieces of advice I give young executives today is never, ever stay in a job or an organization that asks you to cut corners or bend the rules. You should run, not walk away from any company or organization that asks you to compromise your integrity.